Welcome to Timberborn and the settlement of the Steeltide. My name is Zedek, and today I'm going to be building a paradise for the beavers. If you're new to this playthrough, it is late game, and I'm building all sorts of crazy things with the long-term goal of turning this entire map green. Last episode, I built this giant building in the capital district of the beavers. But this building is not yet done. You see, this building is actually a hidden water tower, with the idea that it's going to have water cascading everywhere, making all sorts of different pools. The catch is, it needs to be hooked up to a pipe. So, that is my plan for today. I want to redo some of our dams in the downtown area, get this building hooked up to a pipe, and then just try to make everything up here a paradise with all sorts of amenities. I think our first step for this episode is going to be to get this thing hooked up to water. And that's going to require some changes to our dam. Now, as I mentioned, this entire building is hollow, right? So the idea is that one of these chambers in the bottom here is actually all primed to go to be hooked to a pipe. And that is going to cause water to go all the way up to the top, to this topmost chamber, and then water can then cascade down to the other sides. And it's hard to tell, but at the very bottom of this river on this side, I actually did some groundwork to lay down a pipe already. So you see, at the bottom of this is a 3-wide pipe connecting to this tower. In theory, all we need to do is connect this pipe right here to a contained water source, and we should be able to get this building working. And that's where this dam comes in. So you see, this dam has two sources of water. First off, we've got this chamber here, which is connected to these, and then right adjacent to it is a pipe that's actually connected to our giant water tower, all the way up at the top of the map. So the idea is that because that water tower is taller than this building, it should keep it topped off all the way through the dry season if we could find a way to connect it. So that's the idea. I want both of these water sources connected here. And while I'm at it, this is a very old dam. I don't think it looks quite as nice, so I will move this dam around. The only catch is we need to be careful we don't lose a lot of water when we do this, because on hard mode, that can be very painful. So I'm actually kind of hoping that we get a nice long drought after this next wet season. It won't let us do a bunch of stuff. For now though, what I want to do is start working on building a trench in here, with the idea that this is going to be the pipe that's going to run and connect to these two sources. And we can do that kind of in this downtime we've got before the good season comes. And with a few short rounds of TNT, we've got a new trench. I can't really connect to anything in here just yet until we have a nice dry season. But what I can do is start making the plans of how this dam should look. Now, what I want to do is get rid of this little nub sticking out from the side here of this dam, and then make the dam a little bit more square and in this direction, with the pipe running in the bottom. One catch is I do want this road to still connect. So I'm going to have to try a few different sketches here, but what I'm imagining is that this road will remain a tunnel through the dam, and then everything else should be filled in. And I don't want to make it too tall because I don't want it to compete against our main structure here. See, for example, from this angle, that dam kind of really disguises that, and I'm not really a fan of that. So let's try a couple of just general sketches while paused and see how this could look. We could potentially use overhangs to square it up a bit. That would be doable without too much difficulty. So for example, this is not the final form, but let's say something like that existed, just so we could get a sense of what it would look like. And we could take that up, that's not too bad. And it could even potentially be flush with that side of the city, so we don't cover anything more than the first foundation. Yeah, I think something like that height actually looks really well. That way you could still see a little bit of the waterfall that way. And then maybe we could put a roof on this dam, and then kind of build stuff on top. Now, I don't like this platforms here, but we can figure that out. And it would be really nice if this tower, if we still had some way to see down the run of this road. It's the foundation of something, at least. The other thing I think would be interesting is to have some sort of overflow waterfalls on this side of the dam. So for example, at some point this dam is going to overflow, it's going to have too much water flowing in here. It would be nice to have, I don't know, maybe some overhangs over this way that could cart water, and then waterfall could cascade, down across this bridge. This is just, of course, like the rough idea of a plan, but it might look a little bit better, but I'm kind of liking that idea. You can imagine something sticking out like this, and then maybe sluice gates or overflow, something like that. Now, I think this would honestly look a little bit better if it was more on par with the side of this bridge. because it's kind of a little bit too high right now. In general, I think I'm liking the way this is shaping up. So let me tear down this kind of rough sketch, and then we can start building this for real. So let's see, if I lowered that lip just a little bit, would it give us something a little bit nicer? It looks a little bit better, but I think we could lower it just one more level would be just perfect. Yeah, I'm liking that setup a little bit better. It looks like you're kind of starting to go into the tunnel starting here. Now just to figure out how to make the overhangs over on this side. You know, I think we could get away with just a few strategic rounds of TNT on the side. That's probably the most efficient way to do that. And as for over here, I'm still trying to shape out how this tunnel is going to go through. I want to minimize how much space I lose to holding water. Alright, a little bit of extra tinkering, and I think I have a much better feel of what I'm going to do here now. So I'm still going to have these waterfalls. They're going to cascade, but I've widened this tunnel to be 3 wide. That way you'll be able to see a little bit more down the run. Now, for how I'm going to build the roof for this tunnel, I'm going to do something different this time. I haven't really used these metal platforms, the 3x3s, too much, but I'm going to line them up down the run that way. I think they're probably the least intrusive in taking up space. And to maximize dam space, I'm not going to make it 3 high for this segment. I think 2 high should be good enough. And as I build things here, I think I've got enough space for different statues and other stuff to decorate these waterfalls. So with that said, let's get some of the starting things done. I need the TNT in so I can build the rest of the wall. So we'll get that going. Down at the bottom here, I think I'm pretty sure that I'm going to need that pipe still, so let's go ahead and get that done. And I know for sure that this road is still going to exist. So we can get that in, and that's going to help with some of this other construction. We'll get the TNT laid down first, though, because that's going to be vital for building the rest of this outline. Now, with all that TNT'd away, that should give me just enough space to make a nice square dam structure here. And of course, we'll need to put impermeable floors down at the bottom of these, but I think that should do the trick for letting me build it. It is a little annoying that this part is going to be dirt, and that's going to be levees. It will look a little bit janky. I don't know. I know dirt is more performant for the CPU, but that does kind of annoy me that it looks a little bit different. Well, while we're here, let me fix that by TNTing that down and replacing it with some levees too. Normally it doesn't bother me that much, but if I'm going through the trouble of TNTing all of this away, we'll get it looking good. This is a little tricky area in my design that I think I need to figure out a little bit more. So the idea I have here is, again, I want those cascading waterfalls, but I need to not block, this big tunnel that you're looking through. And so I'm thinking I'll have water enter here through the sides. And of course, I don't want that to drain the dam when it happens. So I think what I need is 2 levels of sluice gates. These ones would let water into the retaining pool, and then these ones would drop water all the way down to the bottom. And then I can seal everything else up. That means that I also need water over here. So I think what I'm going to do is, after we get this a little bit constructed, I'm going to dynamite this part out so that the bottom of the dam is all kind of 3 wide. That's why I have this TNT laid down there as well. With the water kind of entering from that side area, then I can just seal everything else up here. So I think levees then could be lined up all the way up, and we'll get our entrance to our tunnel. And I think buildings look a little bit better when you provide, kind of dimensions to it or layers. So I could make this just a very flat square thing, but I like it kind of when you have these ledges or lips. It gives a little bit more depth to the building. The last overhang here, we can go ahead and build the wall up on this side too. And this one I'm thinking will eventually go all the way up to whatever level we want over on this side. So ultimately this dam is going to be lowered by I think 2 height, and that's alright. Originally I needed all this water here to keep everything topped off. But with our water tower way up at the top of the map, I think we're going to be fine without that additional height down here. I think things are looking pretty stable now. We can probably just go ahead and finish up the rest of the main shape here. Though before I do that, I'm realizing I do need to make a little bit of a change here. So if this is going to be the main dam in here, I can't have this exposed to this walkway or it's going to, overflow into the tunnel. So what I think I'm going to do is actually make this the official exit of the dam with sluice gates. And they're going to keep this segment of the river full. That means this segment that the beavers walk over in the tunnel, that part is ultimately going to have to be sealed off from the rest of the dam below. So now the water will go underneath, it will be on both sides, but it will only exit through this side. So we won't have to rely on this exit from the dam anymore when we eventually tear it out. So next thing we need to do, we need the roof for our tunnel in here. So I think it needs to go up at least one high from the center like that. Now, if we're lucky, we're going to be able to size these out just right and it'll line up, but it doesn't. So we're going to have to do probably something a little bit different for the end here. Well, this side is not as visible as the other side, so I don't care as much. I'm just going to use overhangs there, and I can just build plugs into the structure to seal those off. This tunnel definitely did make this construction a little bit more complicated, but it is all right. Something I'd also like to experiment with. I haven't really done this before, but I've seen other people create kind of textures in the dam wall using levees or sluice gates or other things. I don't know. I'm going to try that for this build just because I've got such a giant wall here, and we'll see how it turns out. I'll just have to make sure all of these are closed, otherwise they're going to drain everything. And then I think I'm just going to finish off some of this with some decorations. I know, and I just realized my pattern is not center. That is going to bother some viewers, I'm sure. So how about we go ahead and fix that? There, that's better. Now you probably noticed I put TNT over on this side too. It's not strictly necessary, but I was going to put another round of sluice gates exits here. Just that could be used to potentially keep this side topped off as well. As I said, not really needed since there's also gates over on this side of the river, but we're going to do it anyways. From there, we can just work on sealing this off. Okay, that is the height I'm going for. So it is just a little bit less than the tower. And then ultimately what I probably am going to do is connect these with bridges. Right, just a little segment over here. That's going to give easy access to build on top. And the drought is over. Right, we're going to top off all our water towers. And then what I am really hoping for here is that we get another long drought. Because what I'll do is as soon as that drought hits, I'm going to start tearing down this structure, which is our water source, and we can figure out how to get that hooked up to the pipe and redone. I'm also going to try to scalpel off this side of the dam when it hits. And unfortunately, we've got a bad tide. Wow, that is bad timing. So I will use this time to finish this up as much as I can and probably start building the interior structure of the pipe here. The only thing that's hands off is this right here. Not much we can do with that because it's all polluted for 20 days. You can see that most of our foundation that the beavers can reach is looking okay. I think pretty soon we're gonna have to switch over to scaffolding. I'm gonna need to build something up here. Now I could have them come up the second story of this building, but it is a little bit of a walk. It's probably easier if I just build some stairs here. And at least temporarily I can cart in a little bit of resources right by that stairwell. Now I've still got beavers walking around in here, so I don't want to dynamite some of this stuff yet, but that's going to be the next step. As soon as this dynamite has been destroyed, I will be able to start planning the roof for this. I've also had a little bit of time to think about what I want to do for the pipe structure. So ultimately I'm going to cover this dam up so I can build stuff on top of it. Same with, I think, at least part of this dam over here. So the idea is that both the dams and the building are ultimately under pressure. So if the water from the water tower and the water source has nowhere else to go, it will start going up into that building. And once the building is full, any excess water is going to be pushed back up to the water tower. Things definitely get tricky if you're trying to maximize your water. If I wasn't trying to maximize my water, I wouldn't care because I would just fill up the building and it would stop flowing. But the fact that I want to just keep every single drop that I can on this map, that makes it tricky. Which brings me to another topic. You'll notice that my science is rapidly growing. I'm going to introduce a new plan. So on this map, my long-term plan is to turn it all green. And one of the challenges that I have with this is that really there's not a ton of water produced on this map on hard mode, and your good seasons are just so small. So given that I've already beat the game, I'm going to introduce a new rule. And that rule is every time I get to 250k science, I get to take any water source on this map and I'm going to double the CMS flow of it. The idea is that the beavers had a stroke of ingenuity, and that allows them to optimize the flow rate. I figure that's a nice good balance between still incentivizing me to continue researching, and each time I unlock something, it's going to give me the option to terraform a new center of the map. So for example, the next time I get to 250k, I might double the water throughput of this, and that would allow me to turn a lot of this green. So something to look forward to in long-term planning. All that talking aside though, I think all the TNT is ready to go in the base here. So if we detonate that, that should let us figure out the roof for this thing. Now, in terms of height for things, I was planning on taking this to be a little bit lower, but that's tough to get in there because that's filled with bad water. I can probably plan the roof for at least this other half of this structure though. I'm going to try to change it up this time. I'm going to see if I can get away with using kind of those 3x3 and 5x5 platforms. Yeah, that does definitely speed things up. And then I'll probably just need these odds and ends here as I can cover up. That will do for now. Once I have a chance to tear this down, I can figure out the last set of cover. And this part is looking very ugly, but it should at least get my beavers able to build all the foundations. This is an area where overhangs are a little OP. It makes it a lot easier to build random structures like this when you don't have to worry about gravity. Let's speedrun this construction and see how much of this bad tide we can get through in the meantime. And after about 10 days, we've got our foundation down. And I actually noticed the beavers are using this new road sometimes, so that's a good sign. 10 days, we still have some time that we can kill to get more prep work done. The main thing I'm thinking about doing is prepping the part of the dam that I'm going to cut off here. So we can probably build an interior wall to just kind of cut off this whole lip. And then we'll lose some of this water, we'll let it drain out, but that's fine. And we can do everything except for messing with this tower here, which is still filled with bad water. The other thing kind of in my mind here is what I'm going to use this for. So if I pan out at this top of the cliff, the idea, again, is I want this tower top to be a paradise. And so I should put amenities, I think, on top of these. So I'm going to split amenities kind of in this area here and up top. So what I'm thinking is this elevated area is going to be kind of the mechanical entertainment district. So maybe we'll do like the detailer and the wind tunnel and stuff up there. And what I'm thinking down here is I'm going to probably sculpt this to be more like a secluded area. I'm thinking trees, a little bit of water, and that will be like the exercise and mud bath retreat area. That said, that means we're going to need power in here somewhere. So that's, I guess, one of the downsides with these big metal platforms. If I need to get power routed underneath through the dam, it's going to be a little bit of a pain. I may end up having to tear one out. We do have easy access to power here, though, because this pipe right here has power in it. So when I reconfigure this around, we can use that as an opportunity probably to get power run over to this side. So I think, at least speculatively, let's run power lines under our lowest level pipe here. That's going to let us get water, or that's going to let us get power kind of underneath the city, which eventually that's going to work its way over here for those mud baths. But in the meantime, we'll plan on this power somehow connecting back over here. So with all that said, I think we can get rid of this old set of stairwells that we had and run this wall all the way across. The part I'm not sure is whether I should keep this lip over here jagged or make this nice and square. I'm really tempted just to square this up while I've got the chance. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. Then I can just make some quick access points for the beavers to get up there and work. And, this is one of those times where having a crane or a bridge is going to help. Just because it's such like vertical construction, I would like them to build each of these columns in parallel. So we're going with the tried and true classic crane technique. While they work on that, I'm going to actually work a little bit on prepping this area. So over here we'll have the exercise plaza, the mud baths, and probably I think the theater, which has to be in the ground. So some of those require power, so I'm going to take this time to run that power at the bottom of all of this, down through this line, and then maybe up through here, or have something connect up through there. Now, unfortunately, this will require tearing out a little bit of what we've got. I don't have to tear out the whole building, thankfully, but this area does have a road underneath. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna build a road down there, and then we're gonna run TNT through everything, so I can just kind of extend that pipe. It's a little disruptive, but that gives us a pretty big build queue. Now, for over here, let's first figure out what we're going to put out here. We're going to potentially have fire pits. We're going to need the theater here because it has to be on dirt. Maybe a swimming pool, which I can't place down, but... And probably definitely some mud baths, and probably an exercise plaza. We've got to figure out a nice aesthetic way to put maybe one of each of these buildings and maybe a couple of the other ones here. Now, I don't want this just being looking like a green wasteland, even though it's irrigated. It would be nice to kind of have some texture and shapes here and then fill everything we're not using in with kind of woods. I want this to be like the escape area for the beavers. So this one might require some tinkering. So I'm thinking like kind of a hill-like escape in there, covered with trees, some winding paths and stuff like that maybe. And a short time later, I've got this rough plan. Now it looks a little bit busy now, but it's gonna look better once I've got the trees in. And we're just going to take a quick tour around. You see, I've got a sprinkling of everything. I've got some campfires in here. I've got these gates, which are kind of going to be like the entryway into the park. I've got our theater, which has a nice commanding view of the valley as a backdrop. And then I've got this nice cluster of mud baths all in here. And you can see, I've tried to disguise all the power connections to these, because you can see the theater plus all the mud baths, they are all connected. So the only thing that I need in here, and this is the last part I haven't quite figured out, is I want to connect this one to power. And ideally, I want to stick a swimming pool in here. And this part is where it's a little bit tricky, but that's where this pipe is going to come in. What I'm thinking is I'm going to take this pipe underneath, once we finally get it built, run it up through here, and then maybe kind of jog it a little bit here with both power and water, and have that fill the swimming pool, and have kind of the power connect underneath the swimming pool into this first mud bath. But other than that, I'm thinking this is pretty good. It looks a little bit like what I was going for is something like a central park, or like a nice curated garden for the beavers. Now, it still looks a little plain right now because I don't have the trees down. But you can imagine that everything that is not yet filled in is going to be populated with trees. So to get that started too, I'm going to put down a couple of foresters. And I'm also going to prioritize hauling in all the dirt. Once they do get that hill up though, then I'm going to put down those trees. And I need to fix that pipe too, because all of our giant city is out of commission. And you're probably wondering, why isn't the entire colony in disarray if this district is not linked? Well, that's because I kind of cheated. See this district building up here? If you look, it's not actually connected with the roads. But I figured I was going to be constructing still, and I was going to maybe move things around. So the real city district is actually still over here. Once this entire thing is complete, I will officially move it over. But yeah, this thing sits on a throne of lies. We've got our build queues pretty full at this point. I'm just going to give the beavers some time to clear some of this up, and then see how much we can get done in the last, 8 days before this bad tide ends. And surprisingly, that took a lot less time than I was expecting. We still got another 4.5 days left in this drought. Well, one of the things we can take care of is the dynamite and get that road back together. So we've got the TNT all laid down. Let's go ahead and destroy that. Once that's clear, we can start putting down our power lines again. Now, this power line should reach all the way up to our great park. Now, one of the things I'm realizing I don't have here is I don't have any bot charging stations in the city yet. So I'm thinking I can hide some charging stations in the middle of the road here, because we seem to have a lot of bots going to and from through this path. Then once that's done, we can go ahead and put down the rest of the platforms and the impermeable floors to complete this pipe. Now the pipe isn't really going to anything at the end of the line by the Great Park. I'm just running it here mainly for power. All that taken care of, we can finish it up by re-adding our roads back in again, along with those bot chargers. Okay, that's looking good. We'll just take a little bit of time to get all that built. That pipe and that power line is going to give us power over to our Great Park. But I still need to figure out how to get power up to our other entertainment district. Now for this other entertainment district, I was thinking of having maybe the Statue of Ingenuity here, as well as, maybe the wind tunnel and some detailers. So we definitely do need power here somehow. Unfortunately, those 5x5 towers, they make it a little bit tricky to get power through. So I'm probably going to have to cut out some of these platforms and overhangs. Now, that shouldn't be too hard. I think I can just splice into the power that we have down here and just run it all the way up to the top of the tunnel. Oh, and while I'm up here, I did notice something. I never actually put impermeable floors on top of this tunnel. So while I'm here, before I forget, let's go ahead and seal that off. That taken care of, let's continue running that power. So for the power, I think I'm going to have to maybe split it into 3 different lines. I think one of these lines is going to go to the monument, and the other 2 are going to go to the wind tunnels, which I'll have kind of on opposite sides of this platform. So up top, I can kind of plan on the statue going in, and I think that looks pretty good. It doesn't overpower the rest of the building like some of my other designs were. So to get power to the statue, we just splice into the power that we already have on top of the tower. And for the wind tunnels, I am going to have to take down some of these overhangs. What I'm kind of imagining is that I'll have 2 wind tunnels flanking side by side down these platforms. So I'll kind of have like a central boulevard going straight up to that giant statue. Okay, I think that puts us in a good spot. Up next, I want to figure out how we're going to cover this other part of the dam. So remember, my plan here is to cap off this side of the dam as well, so it's all under pressure and we get water from up at our water tower. And to make it easy for me to figure out how much water is in this dam at a glance, I'd like to keep half the dam capped off under pressure and the other half kind of open. Now, this is going to look really weird, but what I want is for water to flow to and from the pressurized and unpressurized areas freely. So I'm going to make a stack of sluice gates bidirectional all the way up this column. And remember, sluice gates only let you put water up to their height, which is why I'm stacking multiple of them down at each level. Now, the good news is I think we're getting very close to having this fully operational. We've got half a day until this bad tide ends, and then we can finally tear this down and start working in it. Which is good timing, because with all my, messing around with our water flow, we are running out of water up high. But as soon as this is figured out, I've got it pressurized correctly, I can turn on our water tower and start having this structure all the way up here starting to populate it again. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good that by the time the next wet season finishes up, we're going to be working. And just in case that this next season is, again, a bad tide, I'm going to probably tackle this in the short window that we've got. I've rolled 2 bad tides in a row. I don't want a third. Cycle 73 begins, and we should have good water flowing. Okay, it's time to get to work. So let's get this bad water flushed out of the system, and then we should be good to start tearing things apart. So in retrospect, after I've had more experience with pipes and pressurizing, I was really wasteful by making this holding chamber for bad water and good water so big. As you can see, I'm already like a quarter of the way through the day, and the good water system hasn't opened up yet. So when I redo this bad water diversion system, I'm going to minimize how much space this chamber takes. It would make it a lot faster to flush all the bad stuff out. This system has served us well for a very long time, but it's time to be replaced with something better. To refresh my memory about this water source, we've got 4 CMS of flow coming through here, and it's connected to this diversion system, where this lets out good water at up to 6.6 CMS, and this lets out bad water. The bad water is connected to this vertical pipe that goes all the way down here, then runs through this pipe all the way off to the edge of the map. So that bad water diversion system overall is fairly good. The only bad part was it retaining so much water. So the only things I'm going to do here is, one, remember I was mentioning earlier about potentially doubling water sources when I get to 250k? This water source is not my first choice to upgrade, but if I do, that would be around 8 CMS of flow. So I probably could use another outtake from here. So I'm going to put down another 2 in here that are configured just for good water. And then other than that, this is actually fairly fine. The only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to seal it off much sooner. So it doesn't take as much time for this to start working again. The only thing I'm going to do to speed up construction here is add a couple of bridges. That taken care of, I think our next steps are to start sealing all of this off. So we need to start putting down impermeable floors on everything here. and we can start figuring out how to build the cover for the rest of this. And of course, I'm realizing now I really should have put overhangs instead of bridges here. And then we can completely destroy the wall that we've already got there. With that wall gone, I can see that the power line is kind of still covered. So I'm going to lower this regular terrain a little bit down with dynamite to get it flush. So what I want to do for this part is make sure that these two sides are connected, but I'm only going to have the retaining wall up at the highest level. So I'm going to use regular platforms down below, so water is flowing, levees at the top, and then I'll seal the floor off underneath it. And then maybe I can use some of those larger platforms this time for some of the space. Alright, we'll see if we can pull that off. Now we're on a little bit of a race because you can see that the water line is increasing right here. And it has the potential to cross that threshold. And if it does, we might get a little bit of flooding. So we'll see if we can finish that in time. While the beavers are finishing up this, let's jump back over to our park. I think at this point, we're very close to that pipe being operational. Let's figure out how to get a swimming pool over into our great park and perhaps get this green at the same time. Now, where I was thinking of the swimming pools is maybe one or two here and here. But I think I should be able to dynamite, say, a nice deep pool for each of them. And I can devise a way to connect one pool to the other via a nice little run here. Now, hopefully this is going to be enough to irrigate this area. Because a 3x3, I think, does go 17 wide, but each increase in height will lower the range by 4. Now, the other thing we're going to have to do is make the pipe intake, because we need power through here and we need water. Because we need power because that's going to eventually connect over to these mud baths. So in that case, we're going to need kind of an outtake area from the water for that power line. And if we want it to be really discreet, what I could do is make that intake line under the surface. Oh, we've got temporary flooding, which I wasn't expecting, but I think that's just splashback from the dynamite, so this should stabilize, hopefully. Actually, this flooding has nothing to do with me over here. Oh, the water is coming from our building here. Look at that. So that means water must actually be starting to flow upward. Well, that is a good sign. But it looks like I forgot to seal off something in my design here. This should have levees there. So hopefully I can actually get in there to build that without too much trouble. Otherwise, I'm going to have to tear down a big chunk of this building. So hopefully we can get crews in there to patch that hole in pretty soon. Because one of the things I do want to figure out is how much water I need over here to make this green. And that's hard to measure when everything is flooded. This does point out a flaw in my original design, though. You see, when I had this flooding, I had no way of turning off water going into the building. I really should have added some sort of sluice gates here to regulate the flow of water going into the pipe. So when I had an emergency like that, I could just immediately cut it off. I think I'm going to bite the bullet and just do that now. Before I build this up anymore, let's put in those gates just in case I need to mess with this pipe again in the future. So let's see, we will put down our gates. They will be fully open until I decide otherwise. And now the hard part of dealing with the power lines. So the power line going up to the top of the tunnel, that's easy to take care of. But I think to get power to the other side of the pipe, I'm actually going to have to tear apart the bottom foundations of this tunnel and rebuild it. Unfortunately, I know this is going to cause flooding, but I'm just going to try to do it quickly. And by a little bit of flooding, I mean like a lot of flooding. This better not be a long drought. That would have been a very costly mistake. Look at that. Look at the water flooding out that door. Drought starts in 0.1 days. We'll see how costly that was. Those beavers better build that thing very quickly. Oh, and a 23-day drought too. Not that I wanted to see. And this may be a drought where it's time for me to tap into our water tower. These beavers are not in any serious risk. I've got so much stockpiled water. I've got water on this map. It's more of an inconvenience than anything else. And there we go. That should hopefully be sealed off now. Well, what did that cost us? That cost us half of our water supply in this dam going into the main drought. We'll live with it. On the upside, we do have this extra water here, and everything else is topped off. I really should have done that during a dry season. All that flooding aside, though, let's get back to what I was originally doing. Trying to get all of the Great Park nice and green and those swimming pools in. Unfortunately, it looks like even with those pools in there, it's not enough to get the top of that hill irrigated. I think I'm just going to make this pond a little bit bigger here. Like maybe if I extend this up, I can have it kind of be like an interior lake feature. And that for sure should be enough to get that irrigated. With that green though, I think we can finish up the final plan here. For example, we need to get our power situation for all our spas finally figured out. And once the power lines are done, we can go ahead and run that spa back in place. Taken care of, our pool should be able to be placed back in. And then finally, I think we can get all of this planted with trees. I want it to be a nice forest, just like that. That should make kind of a nice park district for the beavers. I like that. And then once the foresters have finished their job, we can tear them out. With Beaver Park looking pretty good, I'm ready to turn my attention back to the other entertainment district. I had a couple things in mind in here, but really I think I can finish that monument and maybe make like a boulevard with a bunch of different amenities on the side. And after placing a few different things, I've got this layout. So, just a few extra amenities in there. We've got the wind tunnels, we've got just a few gardens, some rooftop terraces so they can overlook everything, a nice exercise plaza so they can exercise with a view, and this kind of collection of back scratchers and tooth grinders, as well as 2 detailers in here. So hopefully this should all be good. Now, this will bring me to our next stage, which is finally, I guess, sealing off this part of the tower right here. And when we do that, we should be able to connect it to power. Once we do this, I think this is the final step to having everything operational. As soon as we do, we'll be able to connect this to the pipe, and then everything in here should be topped off during the dry season. So first step, I think, is we're going to lower this down to the bottom with some dynamite, which unfortunately is a really big pain to get access to. And then I can get rid of this old kind of spillway tower. We don't need that anymore because all of this is going to be under pressure. Now that the tower's gone, we can see a little bit clearer in here. I'm going to put a few sluice gates, so again I have control over potentially turning this off, and then we'll just run a few power lines to connect everything up. All that built, the next step is just going to be to build the roof to this so we can pressurize it. And once that's done, we should be good to go. Oh, and I see our happiness is slowly starting to climb up. It's probably because we just built the tribute to ingenuity, so it's skyrocketing pretty quick. And while I'm here to help boost some of our happiness again, we don't have any flames of unity. I'm going to throw 2 of those just to flank the top of the structure. That should get a good number of our homes down there. So this place is really shaping up. Now, there are corners of this that I'll have to figure out later. Probably not in this episode, but once I'm done with these storage containers, they can be ripped out. So I've got all this green space back here. Worst case scenario, I can just fill it with trees, but it might be kind of interesting to, sprinkle around some campfires and forests around. I definitely don't want to just leave it completely, green space here. For now though, let's seal this off, and I want to see this dam and water tower in action. And prepping for that, we don't need this dam wall here anymore. While they're finishing off and sealing that up, let's go ahead and just destroy this. It'll kind of give me an idea of what space is available here to work with. In the future, this might be an interesting place to add like a little lake feature. Maybe put some extra mangroves up here. And it looks like we've got the top of this done. That is a good sign. I think that means we are ready to turn on our water tower. So let's just do a quick sanity check underneath. We've got our dam in here filled with all sorts of complicated sluice gates underneath. It looks like it's running fine. And we've got all of this dry. So the only downside when I turn this on is this pipe down here. It potentially is going to suffer from evaporation. Now, I know that evaporation has this idea of like adjacency bonus. Water that is adjacent to the water that is evaporating. I don't know how that works when there's water above it. If this suffers as much because it's on the bottom of a river. I don't know. What I can see is that the pipe generally looks like it's filled all this time. So we're already a good way into this drought. And this pipe is one way, so it isn't being replenished by much. So that makes me think that the adjacency bonus is applying, so it's not getting as stiff of evaporation. That's at least my hypothesis right now. That said, that pipe is not yet connected to our water tower, because the water into the water tower is connected with a one-way sluice gate. So you noticed here, This water tower is full of all this water we could potentially deliver. But if I follow that line all the way down here, you can see this is a one-way gate. So in theory, if I destroy this gate, it should allow water to start flowing back into the pipe, and that should top us off. So let's give it a try. So I'm going to delete this and see if water starts flowing the other direction. Well, I definitely do see the water flowing out rapidly, so that is a good sign. Yeah, you can see as I look down the line, it's just picking up steam slowly all the way down. So if I go down here, for example, it's still very quiet, but then that current is starting to kick in. So I'm going to expect that our main dam is going to start getting some water pretty soon. And look at that. You see there's that big bulge of water? That's a good sign that we've got water coming in. Assuming that everything here is properly sealed off, what we should expect to happen is all of this is going to get topped off. This should be topped up, but only up to the top of the dam. And then what we should see is water in our main tower. This is going to be the last thing that should start being populated. I'm fully expecting there to be at least some leaks in here. If we look, we can definitely see that water level starting to rise ever so slowly. And we're definitely eating up a lot of our water in our water tower. Actually, this brings me to a design change I would like to make in our water tower while we're here. I'll wait for the top level of this water tower to drain first, but you'll notice that this pipe that goes all the way up our water tower, it only feeds the top chamber and can consume from the top chamber and feeds the top chamber. The other chambers all are reserved for populating the river. I think what I would like to do is also have an intake into the pipe on this second chamber as this tower goes up. But I want the top chamber to still have reserve, so it would be a one-way sluice gate, I think maybe here, to feed into it. For now though, I'm going to see how far we can get with that water in the upper tank, and I'm just going to keep a close eye to make sure we don't have any leaking. Well, there's no leaking, but I'm noticing the rate of increase is stopping. I have a feeling that we exhausted all the water in our upper water tank. That upper water tank is empty. That makes me tempted to actually expand this water tank to more of this upper area, since we're not really using it. But I will take advantage of the fact that the upper water tank is empty right now to do what I was mentioning earlier. So I'm just going to go down to the bottom here of our second tank, kind of cut into it with the two sluice gates, and then just kind of go back out at the top and rebuild the levees I destroyed. That should give us a little bit more water by eating into this giant massive tank. Now, this is connecting this tank now down to our downtown district. The catch is water only can transfer up to the height that it's coming from. So if I look over here, that source was at level 20 or 21. That will get water in our tower up to here. So everything that is still visible, it will be capable of topping off. The stuff up here, it won't be able to be topped off until we get that top water tower filled again. But functionally, I think that means we're going to have to wait another 13 days before we'll be able to see our new building in action. So I think I'm going to spend a couple days just putting down some odds and end decorations, and in 13 days, we should be able to see this thing working. It's been about 10 days, and we're at the night before the good season coming back. And it's been pretty uneventful. I've been just doing some decorations here and there to burn the time. One of the first things you'll notice is that I did clear these as planting areas. So you notice these trees down here, they have kind of the dark soil, whereas up here, you no longer see that soil. That's going to be because I'm never going to cut these trees. This is just going to be the garden. And these trees will become adult soon, and that will make them look a lot more flush like this in our northern district. The other minor change I made in the meantime was widening this lake up here when you enter the main city. I also put a little decoration on this island in the middle. This is a tribute to the founders of the city. And if we go and look on the other side of the city, I've got some other monuments here, bringing me down to this little corner. So one of the last things I hadn't moved over was our breeding pods. So I made this little tiny hut over here to contain our breeding pods as well as a supply of berries. I actually liked how this hatchery turned out. So you can see what I did is I used 3x3 overhangs to kind of create this tent on top of everything and ran the breeding pods underneath. It's a really nice compact view. I like that. But with that, it looks like we're back in the wet season, so I'm really hopeful that we're going to get a chance to see this entire tower filled up to the brim. That said, too, if we look at our science, in those 10 days, we passed that goal I had for myself of 250k science. Given that rule I set up for myself, I'm going to pick a water source to double. And of all of the water sources that I could pick, I'm actually going to pick the one in the middle of our big giant dam. I think that's the best play right now, because that's going to populate this dam. That's going to give me a lot of extra water to green the rest of the map. So I'm going to switch over to dev mode, and if I select these, and I'm going to double each of these water sources to a maximum of 2. So my next goal will be 500k, and if I can get up to 500k, I'm going to pick a different water source to double. Now there's a lot to pick from, so I'll have to decide later on which water source I'll target for 500k. This one is a very tempting one because it would let me green a lot of this side of the map, which is currently dead. So while we wait for that pipe to bring water in here, I do want to call attention to this corner of the city. And you'll notice that this part of the city, it looks pretty plain compared to everything else where I've planted trees and decorations. And that's because long term, I still have something planned. You can see these sets of levees here. I added these as a reminder to myself because I have one giant bridge I still want to make. And that is a bridge that is going to span all the way across this valley over to this entrance over in our big dam. So this is going to be a giant bridge, probably the largest bridge we've constructed yet. So until I've built that, I've left this kind of as construction supplies. And then eventually we can tear this out. Because really the only thing that I'm lacking in this city now is probably a hospital. I've got all the other amenities kind of set up. So I'm thinking an entranceway to that bridge as well as kind of a hospital would be a good play for this area. Another thing to notice is thanks to all these amenities that we've put in, our happiness has steadily been growing. So I think at the beginning of this episode, we're maybe somewhere in the high 20s, low 30s, but now we're up to about 54 happiness, which that's pretty solid. You know, long term, I also have to figure out what to put on top of this dam. That may actually be a good long-term place for the Earth repopulator. Now, this is big enough that it could fit right there, and that would cover a massive, wow, I haven't seen how big this area of effect is, but that would cover all the people downtown. And taking a peek at our open pool, I can see that we've got water slowly coming in from our pipe. And this is why I ultimately left this part of our upper dam open. Just because it's a lot faster for me to look to see how much water we've got at a glance, instead of me having to use the 3D slider. This is still fairly laggy for me, given how much I've constructed, so I prefer not to have to mess around with it if I don't have to. So let's give a little bit of time for our pipe and our water sources to start flooding this dam, and see if we can actually get our tower working. Well, I see it slowly going up the tower. Okay, here we are at the topmost level. At this point, it looks like it's stalled out a bit. Oh, and these sluice gates over here, they need to be configured. They're a little bit aggressive. This guy here especially, he's draining all the water. All of these sluice gates on the edges, they're what's preventing the tower from rising up. All right, things are starting to stabilize now. For the most part, I think everything is filled all the way up to the brim. Everything, except for maybe this little part here, which is rapidly getting to the top, is done. Now, unfortunately, I do have the occasional flooding, and that does point to something that I'm missing here. For this level of water, I don't actually have an overflow point anywhere on this dam. So when I do have flooding here and there, because there is a little bit of a delay, I noticed, between these sluice gates triggering and actually closing. And so I have them configured very conservatively. But because there's the delay and I have so many of those gates feeding these pools, and so every time it does that, it lets a little bit of extra water into all these pools. And that is slowly adding up. And you can see everywhere on this edges, I'm just very close to overflowing. So I'm actually going to pick some spot here to create an overflow. Probably some gates, I think right here would do it. That could be nice and symmetrical and built on the line there. Now you'll notice that I ended up opting for floodgates here instead of dams. And that's because I wanted to configure the height very precisely. But with that, I think we've got everything operational here. We've got all the pools working. We've got our dams topped off. We've got everything sealed. We've got our lake populated. We got all our cascading pools in here. And then if I take a peek over at our dam, We've got water all the way up almost to the top of our storage tank now. So overall, I'm calling this a success. I'm liking how the new downtown turned out. We've got lots of interesting decorations here, all the amenities, and with this extra water supply, I don't have to worry about keeping our dams topped off at all during the dry season. So with the home district taken care of now, I'm really looking forward to starting to terraform the rest of the map. I think there's a lot of interesting things we could do. I hope you enjoyed this episode and seeing how this colony is developing, and I hope to catch you next time.